I want to put you in a very specific place right now. It is December 20th, 1943.
Okay.
You are sitting in a freezing cold aluminum box about 4 miles above Bremen, Germany. And you are 19 years old.
Yeah, and just to paint the picture, this is the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang.
Yeah.
And that 19-year-old pilot is Second Lieutenant Chuck Joerger.
Right, Chuck Joerger. I mean, before he was the test pilot legend we all know, he was really just a terrified kid on his 8th combat mission.
Barely out of training, yeah.
Exactly. And the situation he is in is bad. His hands are shaking so hard he's actually having trouble holding the stick steady. He checks his fuel, and it's low. He checks his ammo, and he has about 60 rounds left.
Which is, in a dogfight, basically nothing. That's a 2-second burst.
It's a sneeze. And to make matters worse, he is actively being hunted.
Right. Sitting dead on his tail is a German ace named Ludwig Francisek. And look, this isn't some rookie flying his first patrol. This guy has 11 confirmed kills. He has been fighting for 2 years.
So he knows exactly what he's doing.
He has position, he has the speed, and he is actively lining up to turn Joerger into a fireball.
And in this exact moment, Joerger has a split-second choice to make. The training manual, the literal printed book the Army Air Forces gave him, says he has to do one specific thing to survive.
Maintain altitude and turn.
Right, but his gut is just screaming at him to do the exact opposite.
And that choice he makes doesn't just save his own neck. It accidentally exposes a massive flaw in military doctrine, a flaw that literally changes how the entire air war is fought for the next year.
So today on The Deep Dive, we are unpacking what's become known as the impossible dive. We've got a transcript from WWII Deep Dive that breaks down how this teenager from West Virginia proved the entire command structure wrong.
By doing the one thing they explicitly told him was suicide.
Exactly. We're looking at a perfect case study of man versus manual. It's this incredible tension between established doctrine, what the experts claim is an absolute truth, and the really messy reality of physics and survival.
Yeah, but before we get to Joerger's specific move, we really have to look at the board. Late 1943. What is the actual state of the game?
Well, I think we tend to have this sort of rose-colored view of World War II, right? Where the Allies were just sweeping through Europe, totally dominant.
Right, the Hollywood version.
Yeah, the Hollywood version. But in late 43, the air war was, it was terrible for the Americans, wasn't it?
Oh, terrible is an understatement. The U.S. Army Air Forces were facing a literal existential crisis. Their whole strategy was based on daylight precision bombing.
Meaning they fly during the day to actually see the targets.
Exactly. They were sending these massive formations of heavy bombers deep into Germany to hit industrial factories, but the loss rates were completely unsustainable.
I was looking at the numbers from the Schweinfurt raids. This is August and October of 43. They lost 60 bombers in one day.
Yeah.
Then another 60 a few weeks later.
Think about the human cost of that. 10 men to a bomber. That is 600 men just erased from the roster in a single afternoon.
It's staggering.
The overall loss rate on these deep penetration missions was hitting 20%.
Okay, let's just do the math on that for you listening.
Yeah.
A standard tour of duty back then is 25 missions. If you lose 20% of the force every single time you go up.
Statistically, it is impossible to finish your tour. You are quite literally a dead man walking.
Wow.
And the root of the problem was fairly simple. The bombers had to fly deep into hostile territory, but the fighter escorts, the P-47 Thunderbolts and the British Spitfires, they just didn't have the fuel range.
They had short legs. They had to turn back right around the German border.
Leaving the bombers completely naked. The Luftwaffe fighters knew this. They would just wait for the Allied escorts to hit their bingo fuel and turn around, and then they would swarm the bombers. It was a slaughter.
But then P-51 Mustang arrives on the scene. And this is supposedly the hardware fix, right? Because it has the drop tanks, it has the fuel capacity, it can escort the bombers all the way to Berlin and back. So, problem solved.
See, you would totally think so. The hardware was fixed, the plane was capable, but the software, and by that I mean the tactics, was still totally broken. The American pilots were flying this state-of-the-art machine, but they were using tactical doctrine written by officers in the 1920s.
This is the whole formation flying dogma we hear about.
Right. The American commanders back at headquarters were just obsessed with discipline. The rule was, you fly in a rigid, tight formation. You protect your wingman. And you never, ever break that formation to go chasing after an enemy plane.
So they basically treated the fighter planes like they were just passive defensive shields for the bombers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were flying bodyguards, not hunters.
Meanwhile, the Germans are flying completely differently.
Totally differently. The German pilots have been fighting continuously in Spain, Poland, and Russia for years at this point. They had learned the hard way that rigid formations get you killed, so they developed something called the Schwarm, or in English, the finger four formation.
Wait, explain that finger four for us. What does that actually look like in the air?
Okay, so hold up your hand, look at your four fingers, just ignore the thumb.
All right, I'm doing it.
Your middle finger, the longest one, is the flight leader. The index finger, tucked back a bit, is his wingman. Then the ring finger is the second element leader, and the pinky is his wingman.
So it's staggered. It's not a tight parade block at all.
No, not at all. It's spread out horizontally and vertically. It looks loose, kind of like fingertips. And what that does is it allows every single pilot to freely scan the sky without constantly worrying about crashing into the guy next to him.
It's flexible.
Very flexible. And the Germans combine this loose formation with a concept called energy fighting.
We hear that term a lot in aviation circles, energy fighting. What does it actually mean in the context of a 1943 dogfight?
The best way to understand it is to think of your airplane as having a bank account, but your currency is energy. You have two types: altitude, which is potential energy, and speed, which is kinetic energy. And you can trade one currency for the other. If you dive, you spend your altitude to buy speed. If you climb, you spend your speed to buy altitude back.
That makes perfect sense.
So the German tactics were all about managing that bank account ruthlessly. They would stay high above the Americans, wait for the right moment, and then dive down to build massive speed. They'd hit the American formations in a quick pass, and then use all that speed to zoom right back up into the safety of high altitude.
Hit and run.
Exactly. They absolutely refused to get drawn into a slow-turning dogfight where they would bleed off all their energy and become vulnerable.
And the Americans are basically sitting ducks because their doctrine says they aren't allowed to break formation to chase them up into that altitude.
Right. They were fighting with one hand tied behind their back. German aces, guys like Adolf Galland, were just racking up kills. Yeah. Sometimes 3 or 4 American planes shot down for every one German loss. Some units had a 10-to-1 kill ratio.
Which is insane. Now, obviously, the American brass knew they were losing planes at a horrific rate, but you're saying they misdiagnosed the actual problem.
Completely. The senior officers sat in their briefing rooms and decided the problem was that the pilots were being too reckless. Their solution wasn't to change the tactics. Their solution was to order stricter adherence to the manual.
So the answer to failing tactics was to just do those failing tactics even harder.
It's the most classic bureaucratic response imaginable. And into this rigid, failing system drops Chuck Joerger. Now, Joerger is not your typical officer material for that era.
Definitely not.
Right.
I mean, a lot of these fighter pilots were college graduates, right? They came from wealthy families. They had pedigrees. Joerger's from Hamlin, West Virginia.
Deep coal country.
He grew up poor during the Great Depression. His father was a coal miner. And this isn't just color commentary for a biography. His background is actually crucial to why he flew the way he did.
He grew up hunting, right?
Yes, he hunted squirrels to literally put food on the table for his family. And he wasn't using a shotgun where you can just spray the trees.
No, he was using a rifle. He had to headshot small squirrels moving erratically through high branches. Because of that, he developed this supernatural hand-eye coordination. And his eyesight was unbelievable. When he joined the Army, they tested his vision, and it was 20/10.
Meaning he can clearly see at 20 feet what a normal, healthy person has to be 10 feet away to see. His vision is twice as sharp.
Right. In the air, that meant he could spot enemy fighters, which just looked like tiny specks of dust in the sky miles before anyone else in his squadron even knew they were there.
Wow. But despite all that natural talent, because he lacked a college education, the brass was actually highly skeptical of him.
Yeah, he started his military career as an aircraft mechanic. He only got into the cockpit because the Army was so desperate for pilots, they opened up the Flying Sergeant program to enlisted men.
So you basically have a guy with a mechanic's brain and a hunter's eyes. He intimately understands how the machine works, and he deeply understands the instinct of the prey.
Which brings us perfectly back to December 20th over Bremen. He's in his P-51B, a plane he painted the name Glamorous Glenn on after his girlfriend, and Francesa's locked onto his tail.
The situation is completely desperate. Standard doctrine says, maintain your altitude, make evasive turns, and try to drag the German bandit toward your wingman so he can shoot him off you. But whatever you do, do not dive.
And that do not dive rule wasn't just a casual tactical suggestion. It was widely considered a hard technical limitation of the aircraft. There was this universal belief in the Army Air Forces that you simply could not outdive a German Messerschmitt BF109.
Wait, why though? I always thought the P-51 Mustang was a faster plane overall.
In straight level flight, yes, it was faster. But the entry into a dive is completely different mechanically. It comes down to the engines. The German planes used fuel-injected Daimler-Benz engines. The American planes still used carburetors.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener. Why does a carburetor versus fuel injection actually matter when you point the nose of a plane down?
Think about the physics. When you push the nose of a plane down suddenly to enter a steep dive, you experience negative G-force. You lift out of your seat. Everything floats up.
Right, like that stomach drop feeling on a roller coaster.
Exactly. Well, in a carburetor engine, the liquid fuel in the float chamber also floats up, away from the intake valve. So for a crucial second, the engine is starved of gas. It coughs, sputters, and effectively dies until gravity catches up.
Oh, wow.
But in a fuel-injected engine, the fuel is forcefully sprayed directly into the engine cylinders under pressure. It doesn't care about negative Gs. Gravity is irrelevant.
So if an American pilot tries to snap into a sudden dive to escape, his engine instantly quits. But the German pilot behind him, who can dive instantly with full power, just easily catches up and shoots him.
That was the textbook physics everyone believed. But in that moment over Bremen, Joerger is terrified. He's not thinking about the carburetor mechanics. He's thinking purely about survival. So he slams the stick forward and goes into a sheer vertical dive.
And his engine cuts out.
It does. Just like the manual said, for a split second, the big Merlin engine completely sputters. The prop windmills. But Joerger doesn't pull back. He just holds the nose down. He falls right past that negative G point. Standard gravity takes over the airframe again. The fuel drops back down, and the engine roars back to life.
So now he is in a full, wide-open power dive starting from 20,000 feet.
And this is the moment where the manual says he is definitely dead, because the Germans should just follow him down and blast him. But something entirely unexpected happens.
This is where we get into the difference between aerodynamics and raw engine power.
Exactly. The P-51 Mustang was an absolute masterpiece of aerodynamic design. It had what's called a laminar flow wing. It was incredibly smooth and produced very low drag.
Whereas the German BF109
was an older design. It was a great plane, but the airframe was draggy. Lots of bumps and sharp angles.
So as they both point their noses at the ground and pick up massive speed, the wind resistance is hitting the German plane much harder than the American plane.
Yes. As they drop, they cross 400 miles per hour. Then 450. At these extreme speeds, the air itself starts to act differently. It compresses, it gets thick, almost like water. The BF109 hits a literal aerodynamic wall of drag. The airflow over its wings gets turbulent, and the pilot's flight controls stiffen up like they're set in wet concrete.
But the Mustang doesn't have that problem.
Because that slippery laminar wing, the Mustang just slices right through that compressed air. It keeps accelerating.
What about the engine power at that altitude?
This is the second half of the miracle. The Mustang had a Packard-built Merlin engine with a two-stage supercharger. Without getting too bogged down in the engineering, it meant it could mechanically ram thick air into the engine even at weird atmospheric pressures. So while the German plane is physically choking on drag and fighting its own airframe, Joerger's Mustang is performing beautifully.
So he accidentally discovers that once you push past 450 miles per hour, the rules completely flip. The Mustang is actually the vastly superior machine in a dive.
Right. Francis, the German ace, tries to follow him down. He wants the kill, but he simply can't keep up with Joerger's acceleration. His plane starts buffeting violently and becoming dangerously unstable. Meanwhile, Joerger rides the dive all the way down, bottoming out at just 800 feet above the ground, doing nearly 500 miles per hour.
500 miles an hour at 800 feet. The G-forces must be just crushing him.
Oh, his vision is completely graying out. The blood is draining from his head. The wings of the Mustang are shuddering, but they hold together.
And now, because of that massive drop, he has a massive amount of kinetic speed.
He has a completely full energy bank account. He pulls the stick back. This is a maneuver we now call the high-speed yo-yo, though he didn't know the name for it then. He instantly trades that 500 miles per hour of speed for altitude, shooting straight back up into the sky like a rocket.
Where's the German?
Well, Francis had to pull out of his dive way earlier because his plane couldn't handle the stress. He bled off all his energy fighting the drag, so suddenly he is slow, low, and completely out of ideas.
The hunter literally becomes the hunted in the span of 30 seconds.
Yeager just rolls his Mustang over at the top of his climb, drops right in behind the slow-moving BF109, and shoots Franciscus down.
That is just an unbelievable piece of intuitive flying. So he gets back to his base in England, RAF Leiston. He walks into the debriefing room. His adrenaline must still be absolutely pumping, and he tells his superior officers what he just did. I mean, they must have been amazed, right?
You'd think so, but they didn't believe a single word of it.
Seriously, you called him a liar.
Basically, yeah. His squadron commander flat out told him it was impossible. Major Thomas Hayes, who was the operations officer, practically laughed him out of the room. He told Yeager, "You cannot outdive a Messerschmitt. You're a rookie. You must be confused by the stress of combat. You probably saw a different plane."
Wow. It's just easier for the brass to believe the pilot is hallucinating than to accept that their precious manual might be wrong.
That is the blinding power of established doctrine. But Yeager is a stubborn guy. He stuck to his story. And here's the thing, he wasn't the only one. Over the next 3 weeks, a handful of other pilots, guys like Lieutenant William Wisner, started coming back from missions reporting the exact same phenomenon. They'd say, "Hey, I got desperate, I dived, the wings didn't rip off, and I actually walked away from the German."
So the data points are slowly accumulating. They can't ignore it forever. Which brings us to the actual showdown.
Enter Captain Don Blakesley. He was the commander of the 4th Fighter Group. And Blakesley is a deeply experienced combat leader. He's a guy who flies, not a guy who sits at a desk. He keeps hearing these rumors about the Mustang's dive capability, and he decides to run a literal science experiment. On January 11th, 1944, he takes his own Mustang up to 25,000 feet and intentionally replicates the dive conditions.
And what's the result of the test?
The math held up perfectly. He proved conclusively that below 20,000 feet, if you can push the speed past 450 miles per hour, the Mustang absolutely dominates the BF109.
So they finally have the hard proof. But having the data and changing the minds of the old guard are two very different things.
Yeah, that was the real battle. January 18th, there's this massive commanders meeting. Blakesley stands up and presents his findings. But the establishment, heavily represented by Colonel Hubert Zemke, pushes back incredibly hard. And their argument wasn't really about the aerodynamics anymore. It was about the core mission.
What was their main objection to letting pilots dive?
They felt that if you officially encouraged fighter pilots to dive down and chase German planes, you were effectively abandoning the heavy bombers you were sent to protect. Zemke called it reckless cowboy flying. They argued that the physical safety of the bomber stream relied entirely on the visible, close proximity presence of the escorts.
I see. So it's framed almost as a moral argument. Stay in line, do your duty, protect the big guys.
Exactly. But staying in line was getting the big guys killed. The meeting got very heated, and it might have ended in a stalemate, but then Major General William Kepner steps in.
He's the head of 8th Fighter Command, right?
Yes. Kepner was a World War I veteran, but he was a sheer pragmatist. He didn't care about looking good in formation. He looked at the horrific bomber loss charts, then he looked at Blakesley's dive data, and he basically made a ruling. He said, "I don't care about tradition, I care about kill ratios."
It's a very cold, necessary calculus.
He realized that the absolute best way to protect a bomber wasn't to fly 10 feet away from it waiting to be shot at. The best way to protect the bomber was to go out and kill the German fighters before they could even get close. So, on February 3rd, 1944, Kepner issues a brand new directive. He officially authorizes American fighter pilots to break formation, take individual initiative, and pursue the enemy using high-speed dives.
He officially takes the leash off.
He unleashed the hunters, and the timing of this directive was critical because something called Big Week launched on February 20th.
Right, Big Week. This was the massive, coordinated Allied assault on the German aircraft manufacturing industry. Thousands of bombers in the air.
And this time, the fighter escorts didn't turn back at the border, and they didn't just passively hold formation. We have a combat report from March 3rd, 1944. Yeager, who is now an ace, by the way, is leading a flight. He spots a group of German fighters climbing up from below to attack the bombers.
Under the old 1943 rules, he would have had to just hold his altitude and watch them come up, waiting for them to strike first.
Right, but now he spots them. He immediately rolls his plane inverted, pulls the stick, and dives straight down at them. He hits that 600-mile-per-hour compressibility zone. The Germans are totally focused on the bombers above them. They aren't looking up for a counterattack because they know American doctrine says, stay close to the bombers.
So the Germans are still fighting the old manual, but Joerger isn't following it anymore.
Exactly. He hits their formation from above and behind with this massive speed advantage. He completely surprises them and destroys 2 German fighters in 45 seconds before they even realize they are under attack.
Wow, and the broader statistics on this shift in tactics are just unbelievable.
The numbers tell the whole story. In January 44, the American kill ratio was roughly 2.1 to 1, which is okay, but still costly. By April, just weeks after the tactics officially change, it jumps to 4.3 to 1. By June, the Allies are destroying more than 6 German planes for every one they lose.
And what about the bomber crews, the guys they were supposed to be protecting all along?
Their loss rate plummeted from that horrific 20% all the way down to under 4%.
It's the difference between a guaranteed suicide mission and a dangerous job you can actually survive.
Exactly. And the Germans noticed this shift instantly. It broke their morale. General Adolf Galland, the guy we mentioned earlier, sent a very famous frantic report back to command in Berlin. He wrote, "The American fighters have changed. They are no longer bound to the bombers. They hunt." He realized the Americans were now using the German energy tactics against them, but with a technologically superior airplane in overwhelming numbers.
There's a story in the transcript about a specific duel that really drives this home for me. It's May 8th, 1944. Joerger ends up in a one-on-one fight against Georg Peter Eder.
Right. Eder was a top-tier German ace, and he was flying a BF109 G10, which was their new high-altitude variant. Eder gets into a tight turning fight with Joerger. Now, Eder thinks he has him trapped because the German engineering book says the 109 can turn tighter than a Mustang. But Joerger doesn't turn. He does the exact same dive and reverse move.
The impossible move.
He forces Eder to overshoot, drops behind him, and shoots his plane to pieces. Eder survives. He bails out. But years after the war, Eder actually wrote about that specific dogfight. He noted that his intelligence officers had explicitly briefed him that the maneuver Joerger pulled was aerodynamically impossible for an American Mustang.
Can you imagine relying on your official military intelligence briefing, making a life-or-death decision based on it, and then looking out the canopy and seeing the laws of physics just blatantly disagreeing with you?
Eder wrote, very simply in his memoir, "We were wrong."
We spent a lot of time talking about the tech and the tactics, but there is a deeply human ripple effect to this story. The source material mentions an encounter with a guy named Robert Morgan.
Yeah, Robert Morgan was the pilot of the Memphis Belle, probably the most famous B-17 bomber of the war. He actually met Joerger at an aviation event decades later. Morgan walked up, grabbed Joerger's hand, and told him, "My crew calculated the odds. We knew we should have been mathematically dead by mission 8 based on the 43 stats. The only reason we made it to 25 missions was because of you fighter boys. My children exist today because you guys figured out how to clear the skies."
That is heavy. It really anchors why a story like this matters. It's not just about cool planes doing cool maneuvers. It's about literally thousands of families, generations of people who got to exist because of a tactical change.
And for Joerger, this whole experience was really just the foundation. The brutal lessons he learned in combat about high-speed dives, about compressibility, about how flight controls stiffen up when you approach high Mach numbers, that was his real education.
Which comes in incredibly handy just a few years later.
Right. Jump forward to October 14th, 1947. Joerger climbs into the cockpit of the experimental Bell X-1 rocket plane. His goal is to break the sound barrier. The leading scientists of the day told him it was impossible, that there was a physical sound wall in the sky that would literally smash the aircraft to pieces if he hit Mach 1.
So he's facing another manual written by experts that needed rewriting.
Exactly. And the terrifying sensation of the flight controls locking up as he approached the speed of sound. He had felt that exact sensation before, plunging over Bremen in 1943. He knew from experience that if he just kept the nose down and pushed through the violent turbulence, the air would eventually smooth out on the other side.
It's the exact same instinct. Don't fear the speed, use it.
And it's worth noting that the 357th Fighter Group, which was Joerger's unit, ended the war with the highest overall kill ratio in the European theater, 5.7 to 1. They destroyed over 600 enemy aircraft. They were the ultimate test bed for this radically new way of thinking.
You know, it's fascinating to think about this counterfactual. If Joerger had been what the Army considered a better soldier, if he had just obediently listened to his commanding officer and followed the printed manual perfectly, he would have died that day in December.
He would have been a fireball over Germany. And thousands of bomber crewmen might have died in the months following because the tactics wouldn't have evolved fast enough. It forces you to ask a really hard question about the nature of expertise. The experts in the room, guys like Colonel Zemke, Major Hayes, they had the high rank. They had the advanced college degrees. They had all the theoretical knowledge. But Joerger had the reality.
He literally had the 2010 vision to see what was actually happening in the sky, not what was supposed to be happening on paper.
Sometimes you genuinely need someone who doesn't know the rules in order to break them. The carburetor issue the experts worried about was real, sure, but the aerodynamic advantage of the Mustang was realer. The experts were completely hyper-focused on one engine limitation. Joerger focused on the total package of the aircraft to survive.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with something to really chew on. We live in a world right now that is utterly obsessed with data, with best practices, and with strict standard operating procedures.
Oh, we love our manuals today more than ever.
We really do. But take a look around your own industry, or even your own personal life. Where are you following a rule just because it's written in the book? How many brilliant innovations are being stifled right this second because the person with the groundbreaking idea doesn't have the proper rank or the right degree to speak up?
Or simply because the established experts confidently say it's impossible.
Exactly. The next time someone tells you it simply can't be done, I want you to just remember a 19-year-old kid from West Virginia sitting in a diving Mustang, screaming toward the ground, just waiting for the laws of physics to catch up with his courage.
Because sometimes reality is the only manual that actually matters.
That is it for this deep dive. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you in the next one.